Falling in love is, as you can see, a strange phenomenon. We never say rising into love, because that would suggest effort, success, even victory. But falling carries a much deeper implication. It feels as though you're losing your footing, as if the ground beneath you is no longer reliable. And that sensation, that loss of control, doesn't really appeal to us, does it? Being in control, standing upright, remaining alert and safe, those are the hallmarks of a proper, reasonable person. And so, to fall deeply in love is in many ways to go a little insane. Not the type of madness locked away in asylums, but rather a kind of irrationality, a surrender of the usual caution. Because true love isn't safe. In fact, it's a risk, a gamble, a leap into the unknown. It comes with no guarantees. It doesn't say, if you love me, I will behave in a certain way. Number. Love strikes like lightning. There's no telling how or why. It simply happens. And when it does, you are transformed. That transformation, it's a kind of death, isn't it? The death of the ego. The collapse of that little fortress you've spent so long defending. And for that reason, many people resist it. Because life, by its nature, is filled with risk. Every act is based on faith. You take a step without truly knowing whether the ground will support you. You speak without being certain your words will land as intended. Yet you continue walking, speaking, breathing, because a part of you believes in the process. And love is no different. Falling in love means letting yourself be touched, changed, moved by something you do not fully understand. It's madness, yes, but it is also, in a strange way, the most sane thing of all. To fight it, to insist on remaining untouched, unaffected, that is to deny something essential to life itself. Love, like life, is a risk. It demands surrender. Every step we take is based on trust, not certainty. So when you fall in love, you are saying, I'm willing to give myself up, to offer myself to the unknown. And that perhaps is the boldest act a human being can make. Let's now look more deeply into this notion of surrender, because it lies at the very heart of love. Love cannot be controlled. In fact, it is quite the opposite. It is the act of giving yourself away to another person, completely, unconditionally. Not because it's noble or selfless, but because it's the only thing that truly works. The clever ones, you see, are always watching their steps, trying to manage outcomes. But the tighter they grip, the less alive they become. And eventually, they let go. Not because they're forced to, but because something deeper calls to them. Here I am, they say. Take me. Do with me what you will. That may sound foolish. And people will say, you can't do that. You'll get hurt. And yes, you might. But the alternative is to never fall in love at all. To remain distant, untouched, impervious. And that, in truth, is the greater tragedy. Because when you shield yourself from love, you cut yourself off from life. You can't say, I want to live fully, but I want no surprises. That's not how this works. Life and love are inseparable. They move with unpredictable rhythm. And it's only when you begin to move with them, rather than against them, that you start to truly understand. Love makes no sense. It defies strategy. It ignores logic. It is not a contract where one party fulfills terms in exchange for affection. And yet, so many people treat it that way. I need to find the one, they say. The partner who understands me, completes me, fulfills me. But no one can make you whole. And if you are not whole to begin with, you will turn love into a demand, a transaction cloaked in sweetness. True love, however, is not a bargain. It requires surrender. And perhaps the deepest wisdom is this: to give yourself completely, without knowing what will happen. Love is walking into the wilderness without a map. And if that looks like madness, so be it. It may well be that the only truly sane people are those who are willing to fall in love. And yet, look at our institutions, our schools, our churches, our governments. All of them are built upon the principles of control, observation, protection, and order. But love mocks those principles. It melts them completely, flowing around them, beyond them. True love means allowing yourself to be undone, and that is exactly why most people fear it. Love is too powerful for the ego, that fragile notion of who we think we are. Like a shadow under the sun, it fades away. For those who are unprepared, this is precisely what makes love feel dangerous. It threatens their identity, their narrative, their carefully constructed story, and so people resist. They hold on tightly. They try to manage, secure, and predict love. But love refuses to be contained. The truly wise, the ones who have seen deeply into the nature of life, understand this. They know that to live at all is to risk everything, and they learn to let go, not carelessly, but with reverence. To love someone is to truly see them, to allow them to be exactly who they are, without trying to bind them or possess them. There was a time when marriage was seen not as a prison of obligation, but as a relationship grounded in mutual freedom, a daily choice between two people to walk side by side. And in that space of openness, love could flourish, not a love maintained by duty or held together by old promises, but a love that lived in the present, honest and real. Today, however, many try to imitate love, to perform it, and that always brings harm. Because false love creates pain on both ends. The one being deceived suffers the absence of real connection, and the one pretending becomes bitter and resentful. There is no script for love. It arises spontaneously, like sunlight or laughter. And when you feel it moving through you, the only wise response is to allow it, to let it work on you, even if it changes you, especially if it does. Because in the end, love is what holds you, not what you hold. Now perhaps you're thinking, all this surrender to love sounds beautiful, but what if I don't feel it? What if love doesn't come naturally to me? What if I try, truly try, to love others, to be kind, to give of myself, and yet it all feels forced, false? The truth is, you cannot teach someone to be selfless by appealing to their selfishness. A person may give away everything they own, may even sacrifice their own body in some dramatic gesture, and still be acting from the deepest kind of self-interest. It may be done with subtlety, with a spiritual polish, a saintly demeanor. But deep down, they are still calculating, still grasping. That kind of love, what we might call simulated love, is always damaging. It leaves behind a sourness, a subtle sense that something is off. The person on the receiving end begins to feel it, even if they can't put their finger on what's wrong. Resentment grows on both sides, and that is why so many attempts at generosity, kindness, or self-sacrifice fall short. It's not that the gestures themselves are wrong. It's that they don't come from the heart. They come from a performance, an idea of how one should behave. And that creates distance, not connection. So what do? Are we meant to sit idly, waiting for some mysterious grace to descend upon us and awaken real love? Do we remain trapped in selfishness, powerless to change until something happens to us? Not exactly. Still, there is wisdom in acknowledging that honesty is the beginning of transformation. If, in looking deeply within yourself, you find that you are selfish, then be selfish, but do it with full awareness. Keep your eyes open. Ask yourself, what do I love, even if that love is rooted in selfishness? What am I clinging to? What moves me? Even those desires and attachments are expressions of love. There's energy there. It's just flowing in a particular direction. Like water through a hose, the force is real. It only depends on how you aim it. Some people love whiskey, others love admiration. Some love beauty, or power, or ice cream. And yes, you might say, but that's not real love. That's attachment. The truth is, the energy is the same. We're simply beginning from the far end of the spectrum. So instead of trying to suppress it, rather than pretending to be a generous, noble person, when all you crave is another drink, follow the thread of your desire. Observe it. Let it move through you. Love can only be redirected when it's already in motion. A ship anchored in the harbor cannot be steered. And this is where most people go wrong. They believe they must first become enlightened, spiritual, fully transformed. Only then, they think, will they be ready to love? But the opposite is true. You begin exactly where you are. Even if your starting point seems small, selfish, or insignificant, follow what genuinely stirs your soul. Because if you do, honestly and without shame, that thread will lead you. It will evolve. When you pursue what you love, you begin to see that love never fully aligns with the ego, with the self you cling to. Even if you begin by saying, I love myself, and try to preserve that feeling, trying to embrace the self you're so fond of, it slips away. It's like trying to kiss your own lips. You chase it in circles, and it always stays just out of reach. Yet when you turn your attention outward, toward poetry, a good meal, someone's laughter, or the sky before a storm, you begin to notice that what you love is never truly you. It's something other. And from that recognition, something begins to shift. In pursuing your so-called selfish desires honestly, with full awareness, you begin to see that the line separating you from the rest of the world is far more porous than you once believed. This shift doesn't happen because you try to become something spiritual or holy. It happens the moment you stop pretending. The moment you let the energy of love move through you, without resistance, it starts to transform you. There's a subtle misunderstanding that often creeps in here. People tend to divide love into two categories: the lower, carnal form, and the higher, purer one. They scoff at the former and praise the latter. Lust, they say, is base. Infatuation is shallow. But this other, this spiritual love, this divine connection, that is what matters. But this division is entirely imagined. It's based not on true perception, but on judgment. In reality, love is a single energy. Like white light breaking into a rainbow, it manifests in different colors, but it remains one source. Think of the red end of that spectrum as what Freud called libido, physical, erotic love. Then come the blues and greens, affection, companionship, deep friendship. And finally, at the violet end, agape, spiritual love, divine charity. But this spectrum is all one river. The tone changes, not the essence. The mistake is in trying to cultivate the higher tones by cutting off the lower ones. It's like lopping off the base of a tree and expecting it to grow taller. Yet that's precisely what many religious and spiritual traditions have tried to do. Reject the so-called lower forms of love in the hope that something purer will take their place. Deny desire, suppress emotion, mute the senses, and you will rise to the divine, they say. But that approach is misguided. The issue is not the presence of lust. The issue is our fear of it. People don't trust themselves to flow with the current without being swept away. But when you allow that energy to move, without resistance, it begins to clarify itself. And that is something deeply beautiful. Just as a muddy stream clears as it flows, love becomes purified through movement. If you dam it up out of fear, if you stop it from flowing, the water stagnates instead of cutting off the forms of love that seem messy or raw. Perhaps we'd be wiser to honor them, to see them as part of a greater whole. Even the strangest or most crude expressions of love have a place in the story. Love doesn't require purification by elimination. It purifies itself through flow. And when you truly let love move, when you follow it without turning it into a demand, without trying to grip or define it, it begins to show you something profound. You realize that the person you desire is not just a collection of pleasing sensations or familiar comforts. No, they are a mystery, a doorway, a glimpse into something vast, beautiful, and completely beyond understanding. At that point, love becomes something filled with awe. But it reaches that state naturally, not because you forced it, not because you dressed it up in religious language or spiritual posture. Sincerity is what brings it there. After all, there's little value in pretending you don't feel desire. That's not virtue. That's just fear, wearing the mask of discipline. And fear, masquerading as detachment or purity, creates no fertile ground for love to grow. What we must understand is that love is not a series of separated pieces, some sacred, others shameful. It is a unified action. The energy is the same, whether you're holding your lover close, tying a child's shoes, or quietly watching the last light of day spread across the hills. It is life, witnessing itself, and the moment you try to own it, to label it, to hold it tightly in your hands, it slips through your fingers. Because love, like life, is not a possession. It is a current, a movement, a flow, and it cannot be dammed up or forced into a container. So let it go. Let it move you. Let it arrive unexpectedly, in a stranger's touch, in the way the wind brushes your cheek, or even in the sorrow of seeing someone who reminds you of a friend you've lost long ago. In those moments, you begin to realize that love was never fragmented. It only wore different faces, played different roles, but it was always the same thing. This brings us to a very delicate subject: marriage. Our society, for all its progress, has turned the whole idea upside down. We expect marriage to be built on romantic love, this wild, unexplainable, powerful emotion. We expect to fall in love before we marry, and then to remain in love afterward, as if the emotion itself could serve as the foundation for a lifelong commitment. But falling in love is irrational. It cannot be controlled or scheduled. It strikes when it wants to, in ways we don't fully understand. And it's just as likely to fade as it is to arrive. That's its nature. So when the feeling inevitably shifts or withdraws, people panic. They assume something must be deeply wrong. But the truth is, the entire foundation was built on a misunderstanding. Falling in love can't be predicted or promised. It comes and it goes. Building a lifetime partnership on something so unstable is like constructing a house on shifting sand. That's why so many people find themselves trapped in what could be called a false love affair. They mistake a wave of intense, passionate emotion for the deep, enduring bond required to create a life together. But when the heat fades, they look across the room and ask, "Who is this person I married? Why don't I feel what I used to feel?" And when they unexpectedly fall in love with someone else, torn between duty and desire, the entire foundation of their life trembles. Marriages dissolve, families break apart. But the real issue isn't falling in love. The real issue is the belief that love can be guaranteed by an institution, that a ring, a vow, or a ceremony can ensure the constancy of the heart. It can't. This doesn't mean that marriage itself is wrong. In fact, marriage can be a beautiful thing if we approach it with different expectations. There was once a more traditional, and arguably more realistic, view of marriage. It was seen as a fair and honest agreement between two people, a partnership. a collaborative effort to build a life together, raise children, and share day-to-day companionship. Not a prison of endless passion. And in that kind of arrangement, love could come and go without shaking the entire structure. It could rise and fall, like the tides, without collapsing the house. If both partners were honest and said to each other, "I choose to marry you because I respect you. I enjoy your presence, and I trust you as someone to walk beside," then there would be space. Space for each person to be fully themselves, not a reflection, not a shadow. And if within that partnership, emotional and physical attraction blossomed, all the better. But even then, the attraction wouldn't be the foundation. The core of such a union wouldn't be permanence. It would be honesty. And in that honesty, real love can thrive. It's not that I will always feel the same way about you. It's that I won't lie about how I feel. That, in itself, is a much deeper kind of commitment. It means not pretending when the feelings shift. It means letting go when the warmth fades. It means honoring the other person as a living, evolving being, someone who may grow in ways you can't foresee, not treating them as an extension of yourself. And it also means that if love, uninvited and unexpected, finds its way to one of you from elsewhere, it isn't necessarily a betrayal. It is an event that calls for deep attention, not immediate condemnation. Because it isn't love for another that destroys a marriage. It's dishonesty. It's the refusal to admit that everything is changing, while acting as though nothing ever will. So if marriage is to be something sacred, maybe we must begin to see it not as a binding of two people, but as a shared space, a free space, a mutual agreement to walk together, over and over again, not out of obligation, but out of awareness, and the quiet joy of recognizing, again and again, yes, you are still you, still becoming, still someone I choose. That is the space where love can thrive. Love doesn't have to blaze constantly. It will glow and fade, rise and fall, much like the moon drawing the tides. And when given that freedom, within an atmosphere of openness and honesty, it tends to return, deeper, wiser, more real. So what happens when you stop trying to manage love? When you let go of expectations about how it should feel, look, or last, and just let it happen the way it wants to? You begin to understand something profound. Love is not something you do. It's like a breeze drifting through an open window. It isn't the result of effort or performance. It's not manufactured through virtue or self-discipline. When you stop trying to control it, it rises naturally, like breath, like laughter, like birdsong at dawn. And that's the mystery. You don't generate love. It flows through you. Love begins to appear everywhere the moment you stop clutching, stop bargaining with life. In the trembling of your own hands, in the sound of rain on an old rooftop, in the face of a stranger. And when it comes, don't hold on to it. Don't try to possess it. Let it come. Let it go. Because just like water, love loses its nature the moment you try to hold it too tightly. It's like floating on a river. You don't know where it's taking you, and the current is strong. The more you fight, the more you sink. But if you relax, if you trust it and float, the river carries you. Not always where you expect, but often exactly where you need to be. And so, to love is to trust the moment, not to map out the course, not to force a direction, but to surrender fully to its unfolding. That, perhaps, is the greatest act of faith, to let love be what it is, wild, uncertain, uncontrollable, and still to say yes. So if love makes you foolish, don't be afraid. If it wounds you, don't be afraid. If it keeps asking you to change, don't be afraid. Because you were never meant to control it. You were meant to be moved by it. And when you finally let go, When you give yourself to its current, you realize something beautiful, that the river was never separate from you. All along, it was you, returning home to yourself,